Endometriosis is a disease in which tissue similar to the lining of the uterus grows outside of the uterus. This leads to inflammation and scar tissue forming in the pelvic region and elsewhere in the body. The cause of endometriosis is unknown. There is no known way to prevent endometriosis. There is no cure, but symptoms can be treated with medicines or, in some cases, surgery. On today's podcast, we're speaking with Katherine Stanley. She runs the Victorian-based Foundation, Endo Help. They are a volunteer organisation focused on education and empowering people with endometriosis, pelvic pain and period pain. They collaborate and research with others to ensure a better future for people living with endometriosis. Can I ask why you started to focus your career on endometriosis?
Yeah, after a 17-year diagnosis delay and having daughters myself, I just, when they were quite small, decided that my life, the life that I'd had, was not going to be the life that they had or their peers had. And so I suppose a bit of the inner mama bear came out in me, and I decided that it was time that no one put up with the amount of pain and derailing of life that I had, and that it was time that people with chronic pelvic pain conditions could fulfill their true potential.
What was happening to you, and what were your symptoms for endometriosis?
Really painful periods. The first one that I really remember is, and I would have been about 15 or 16. The pain was so bad, I was having trouble getting down the hallway to tell my mum how unwell I was. Felt like I was going to vomit. I honestly thought I was dying because of how young I was and how sick I suddenly became. But we saw the GP, who just said it was retrograde menstruation and to kind of get on with it. And that started a journey of 17 years of seeing doctors on and off and going through periods of thinking maybe this is all in my head, and other periods of there has to be something really wrong with me. My symptoms were painful periods. After a few years, it was also pain during ovulation. A few years after that, it was pain a lot of the time throughout the whole month. I'd get back pain down my legs, lots of gastrointestinal symptoms, lots of fatigue. I was really tired all the time, and I could never understand how everybody else could manage everyday life when I found it so hard. And yeah, I think they were the core ones that I had. I also know that there are other people that have the symptom of painful sex, which is obviously, it's already hard enough to talk about, menstruation and painful periods, but it's even harder to talk about the impact that it can have on relationships and intimacy. And even if you don't have painful sex, it's a pretty big dent on relationships and intimacy when, for me, every time I had an alcoholic drink or even some foods could trigger this big bloating. Was the other one I forgot to mention, this big kind of bloat or gastrointestinal symptom.
So essentially debilitating quite from a young age.
Yeah, yes.
Especially when you're being told to suck it up.
Yeah, I really did go through many, many months at a time of thinking, I'm crazy. Like at some point, someone's going to figure this out, that I've just made this up. And then, like I said, then I would go through these other periods where it had been really bad, and I'd be like, this cannot be in my head. There's something really, really wrong here. Why can no one find the answer?
How did you end up getting diagnosed?
I was going through infertility and I was taking hormones to make me ovulate, and every time I took them, I would end up in emergency. And one of the times that I ended up in emergency, they said, look, we're going to write to your gynecologist. This isn't a normal reaction. And when I went to see her, she said, oh, do you get painful periods? And I said, oh, they're really painful. I actually can't work when I have my period. And she said, why didn't you mention it? Well, I did mention it for so many years that I kind of forgot to keep mentioning it. And I just really thought that it was my lot. And she introduced that maybe I had endometriosis. And I went home and Googled it, and honestly, and now from running a support group for many years and talking to lots of people with endo, it's a normal reaction that I had, which is that we often feel really elated, like there's an answer, thank goodness. And it's not very often that you hear of a group of people being elated at finding out that they've got something that is not curable.
It's one of those things. I spoke with Laura, who's also been on the podcast, talking about her experiences with stage 4 endo, and just that excitement that finally someone believes you and knows what's going on, and then the switch to frustration of going, oh, okay, and now we're just going to deal with the symptoms. We can't do anything about the pain. Do you find in the support groups like that is literally the role of emotions?
Yes, totally. That it is this like kind of overwhelming joy almost. Someone believes me, I have this thing. And then, yes, as you said, then there is that reality check of this is an incurable condition. And often surgery does help for a short period of time, but then lots of people report that the pain does come back. And I think that one of the things that a support group brings, or bringing a group of people together like that, is it can be really isolating. And if you felt really isolated for a long time, it can just be so amazing to hear, oh, you get that pain too. Oh, that's what that looks like for you as well.
And it's so tough as well. Like, again, we spoke to Laura. Her laparoscopy was horrible and really painful and really difficult for her to recover from. Is that something, like when we hear about this stuff in the media about, that the surgery being the only way to officially diagnose, when you hear that, you don't really associate that with being really quite actual major surgery and quite painful and sometimes really quite difficult to recover from. Is that something, again, that is really quite similar in the group of, you've got this major surgery just to get this diagnosis, but is it worth it?
Yeah, I think that's part of the conversation. Lots of people are still focused on, wanting that surgery or the next surgery maybe helping. I think we are still quite surgery focused as a cohort. But yeah, I think that the conversation is starting to shift. We now know, and chronic pain science is teaching us, like if you had a broken leg and it had been broken for 5 years, even if I got you the best surgeon to fix your leg, you would still have pain. Because your brain and your body is now used to producing pain. It's trying to protect you. And so that's when all of your osteo and your psychologist and your nutritionist and your physio all play a role in trying to help your mind and your body sort of calm down from that 5, 6, and I'm saying 5 or 6 years, but we're really talking a lot of people are 10 to 20 years of severe pain. And I do think we downplay that any surgery is quite hard to recover from. And also if you've got a chronic pain condition, and we know that there is an inflammatory component of endometriosis, it's harder to recover from.
It is. Can you give us more of an explanation of what exactly a laparoscopy even is?
Sure. So the surgeon will put small excisions, so small cuts in the person's belly. They vary how many cuts it is, and then they use an instrument to sort of blow up the tummy, put some air in the tummy so they can have a look. And then they investigate around through your pelvis to determine whether there are spots of endometriosis in there. And it really depends on your staging, and there is different, it's a confusing disease. There's different variants of staging. There's also different ways to stage it. But depending on how long they've been in there and how much they've had to remove or how much kind of poking around they've done in there will really determine how you feel when you wake up. There are certain people that believe that excision surgeons are the best. There are others that believe that ablation is best. But once again, you just need an experienced surgeon that does know what they're doing. They may even do a bit of both throughout the surgery, or they may pick one or the other. And the other thing that we're finding is that those that can get a really good pelvic ultrasound, so an ultrasound done by a gynecologist that can actually show where the main parts of the endo are, they recover better from the laparoscope because they're not having to poke around as much because they already kind of know where they're looking. So if you were speaking to Laura with stage 4, my guess is that she was in there for several hours.
Yes, she was.
And any surgery when you've been under for several hours and someone's been moving around your organs, that is a slower recovery.
And a scary recovery as well. Every laparoscopy, unless your gynecologist has been able to find those in the scans, you don't really know what your body's in for.
Correct. And even with the scans, it only gives you some idea because it's not quite as good as looking. Scary, and particularly scary when you're kind of wanting an answer and then you've got the answer, but then now you've got this big recovery.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're really and you're struggling with the mental load as well of going, yes, there's relief in having a final diagnosis and knowing that the pain was real, but now you have to go through knowing it's endometriosis and what that means for life, for the rest of your life as well.
Right.
It's a big thing to take on.
Yeah, it's huge.
To go through those different levels, are we able to discuss the levels? Like you said, it's quite complex.
Yeah.
What are people dealing with for each of those levels? Like, do stage 1 people even know they have endo? Does stage 5 mean you're pretty much wiped out? So where are people at?
It's really interesting. So there are people that have stage 4 endo and they have no pain and they have no symptoms.
What?
And there are people that have stage 1 endo and they have excruciating pain and they are completely debilitated.
Oh, wow.
So the surgical staging is just so one surgeon has a bit of an idea about, if one surgeon has done it and staged you, then the next surgeon can see what that first surgery looked like. But even then, there are different staging rules across countries.
Right.
So I can't give you a simple answer of what stage 1, 2, 3, or 4 look like. But what I can say is that all of them can be really painful. And if you do have any kind of debilitating pain or if your period is interfering with your life, we know it's common, but it's not normal. And so it's so important that you go and get some help. A person with stage 4 endo usually has had a much bigger surgery once it got to the surgery time. We also know that the longer the diagnosis delay is, the more likely it is that you're in one of those later stages.
Okay. And it would be more likely in one of those later stages that the endometriosis has found its way into other body parts as well?
Yes, that is the theory. I'm saying yes. There's actually quite a lot we don't know.
Okay.
My guess is that yes, meaning the longer that this disease has kind of been growing in your body, the more likely it is to have spread. But we also don't fully understand the mechanism of why it grows, or why is it that I had stage 4 endo and I had 17 years of debilitating pain, but some other lady or person has stage 4 endo and they don't know until they go in to have their tubes tied or to have some other procedure, and that's how it's found.
It's very, very complex condition.
Yes. And I think it's really important to highlight that, because I think when you've got an endometriosis diagnosis, but then you find out that it's just stage 1, you might start to, re-employ that rhetoric of maybe I am crazy, like it's only stage 1. But the stage doesn't correlate with the pain. So please, if anyone's listening and they have stage 1 or stage 2, it's not any less.
So it's not, the stages, like giving those level of stages isn't actually about the person itself. That's actually the medical teams being able to communicate.
Correct.
Right. Okay. So it's not about us. It's about the doctors.
Correct.
Okay.
And it's about the surgical doctors, not even any other doctor. It's about what they found surgically and nothing else. And this disease is a lot more than what they find surgically.
It is full on. And it's also difficult as well, just going through, you're saying period pain is not normal. When, I don't know about you, but, well, actually, no, we've talked about it already. You had a doctor say, oh, well, just deal with it. When we were growing up, it was just, periods come with pain. We just deal with it and move on. We just keep on walking. We're strong women. You just keep going. Now we're allowed to say that we're in pain. Thankfully, this is completely changing. But are you finding much more of a switch in maybe sort of younger people actually being more able to say there's pain and someone paying attention to that than, say, in our generation that was just deal with it, ignore it?
I think it's a mixed bag. I think there are definitely, there's way more awareness. It's through the news. There's the pep talk that's gone to some schools in Victoria and in other states. I think, what we're finding is that a lot of people that were told that period pain was normal, it was either by medical professionals, but also by their mums or aunties or grandmothers who unfortunately had really bad periods themselves and they were being ignored. And so I think that what we're probably going to find is it's this next generation whose mums are kind of on the cusp of being, oh, we can talk about this now, and oh, this isn't normal. I'm hoping that that's going to now turn to that next generation and they're going to be raised to be like, no, this isn't normal and we're going to do something.
And you've gone completely to it by creating Endo Help so that your daughters don't have the same issue. So hopefully it's working.
Sure, I hope so too. Yeah, because, and my mum told me that it was normal and it was a part of life. And Actually only been in the last 5 or 6 years that she's reflected and said, I actually think I had endometriosis. Like, it's taken her a long time to kind of undo her own medical gaslighting, where she was told it was normal.
Yeah.
10 years ago, I said to her, Mum, you used to drive around on a plastic bag because of that heavy bleeding. That was probably endometriosis. But it took her a while to kind of, and I understand it. When you've been gaslit for a long time, when we've all been told the same thing, it takes a long time to stop and think, hang on.
I've even finding it now, like I'm getting completely different advice from different gynecologists than what I've had for years as a teenager in early 20s. And that advice from teenager, early 20s, I was saying to my stepdaughter. And then I went to my doctor, my gynecologist heard different things. And I was like, I had to go back to my stepdaughter and actually go, I'm actually really sorry. I apologise for saying that this was normal because I've just found out it's not. So I apologise. Tell me what's going on. And it was just, and she was fine with it. But it's just crazy what switches and what changes. And luckily we're in a space where we can feel a little bit more comfortable with it. Is there a difference in such when it comes to pain, like the difference between endometriosis, pelvic pain, period pain? Is there a way to be able to tell the difference without having to do a laparoscopy?
Not yet. There are a cohort of people that have pelvic pain and they don't have endo, and they wake up from the laparoscope with that devastation. This must be in my head. The more we understand, the more we're kind of reaching the conclusion that there is just this cohort of things that we don't understand that is creating pain in the pelvis. And maybe we will know in 10 or 20 years, but it doesn't mean that your pain's not legitimate. It doesn't mean that you can't access the same sort of help that someone with endo can. Obviously not the surgery, but the other kind of help. There's lots that we can do for period pain, but until it's investigated, we can't I can't say to you, look, if it's X, Y, and Z, then this is what it is. I wish that I could, and hopefully in time we will have an easier way to diagnose it. That's something that lots of researchers and scientists are working on at the moment.
Yeah, and I guess the pelvic area does have quite a few organs.
So many organs jammed in there.
All squished in.
Yeah.
How do you find which one is the one that's causing the issues?
Correct. And menstruating is an inflammatory process in itself. So it makes sense that there is inflammation in that area with all those organs, that there might be pain and it might not be endo. But I would say that, once again, if pelvic pain is interfering with your life, and that looks like if you can't go to school or you can't go to work, or maybe you're missing parties or something like that, it's time to talk to your doctor. But also we often talk about heavy menstrual bleeding. Now, what does that mean? How many tablespoons, and how do you even know what that means? But I once heard a gynecologist say, if you're needing to change your pad overnight, or you're bleeding through overnight, or you're needing to put a towel down, it's time to go and talk to your doctor, because bleeding that's that heavy is too heavy.
Wow. Yeah. I have too many memories of all of that.
Yeah.
Like I don't even want to go back to my teenage years of that much bleeding.
But no one, I don't know about you, but no one told me that.
No.
I remember reading things about tablespoons of blood and thinking, well, how would I have any idea?
Yeah, what do you do? Do you sit on a tablespoon all day, and then fill a cup? Like, well, how do you measure that?
Correct.
How much does a pad hold?
Yes. So I still think our messaging is still quite vague, and we need to get better at really explaining what that means.
Yeah.
Quantifying what a problem might look like and what too heavy means.
Yeah, I think it is, and it is very much in the wording as well, because it's not a comfortable conversation to have, especially with someone young who's maybe just started menstruating. How do you quantify? How do you even speak to them about, well, is it heavy, is it not, without it being an accusation, without complete understanding? It's a tough world.
It totally is. Yes.
There's no cure as yet. Are we anywhere near it? What do you think?
I don't think we're near it, no. I think what we're understanding is it is more complex than we thought.
Oh.
And as we're kind of diving into the complexity, we're not getting closer to a cure, no.
We're getting further away?
I don't know that we're getting further away. I think we're getting closer to being able to diagnose without a laparoscope, and that will be a huge relief for a lot of people. I wish I could say that I thought we were getting closer to a cure, but it's such a complicated disease.
There has been media around endometriosis there is some awareness, do you think more can be done, especially just in everyday life, in workplaces, corporate life, children growing up, kids growing up? Can more be done to build awareness?
If it was up to me, every child would have a picture book about what menstruation is. I mean, you talk to your children about their elbows and their knees, but we don't talk about other body parts, and we don't talk about menstruation. And, the earlier that you actually have those conversations when they're not teenage years, maybe full of embarrassment already, I think the better. I think schools, we've got, like I said, Pep Talk that's gone to a few schools in Victoria, but it would be great if every school had a great program about menstruation, discussing periods, discussing what's normal, discussing what's not for boys and girls and anyone who identifies it anyway, so we can all support one another. Because boys may not menstruate, but they may live with someone who does. They may be friends with someone who does.
They came out of someone who does.
Correct. And so it's important that they know how to support as well, and not joke or laugh if a 13-year-old has blood on their dress or their school clothes. I think workplaces definitely should be having open conversations. It's fairly interesting, the workplaces that I do talk to, as soon as they open that conversation, they're always surprised by how many people in their office have some sort of pelvic condition. And I just think, why not open that conversation? Why not be incorporating a way that people with endo or people with pelvic pain or people that menstruate could work in their best way? And if that is that on once a month for 2 days they're in their pajamas at home, we can do that now. We know that. We all had a 2-year experiment of working in our pajamas. So
Yeah.
it's time to have those conversations.
If it's going to allow for more productivity while still having some self-care, like, how could this be a problem?
Correct. It's better for the individual and it will be better for our economy.
Yeah. I think it's definitely a world that needs to start being opened up. Like, as we sort of just talked about, we can't actually have human beings, we can't have life without menstruation. So it is something that is really quite vital to absolutely everybody. And having that knowledge is care.
And knowledge is also empowerment. Because when you have that knowledge, you can make the choices that are right for you.
Can you tell me more about Endo Help?
Sure.
What do you do?
We are a grassroots, not-for-profit, but charity. And we run a monthly walk called Walk the World for Endo. And the idea of the walk is to raise awareness and money about endometriosis. It's quite intentionally goes for a month because people with endo or anyone with chronic pain condition can't go and do a long walk over a weekend without paying for it. So the idea is, instead of pushing your body too hard, you walk as often as you might want. And so we have people that might walk 5 or 10 Ks every day as part of the walk and raise awareness, and they post beautiful pictures of their long walks. And we have people that have just come out of surgery, and they might talk about why they only walk into the letterbox, or how they might have walked from their bedroom to the couch, and they post the pictures about their recovery. And we have people that are just in a pain flare, and they also talk about why one day they can walk 1 or 2 Ks and the next day they're only walking to the letterbox. And I think that's really important, because we all know what it's like when you're sponsoring someone, or you see on social media that someone is doing something for a charity, how much you learn about that topic. And so that month really is kind of about spreading to whoever we possibly can about what it's like. It also empowers people with endo to really share their story and find their voice. And that's a pretty special part of it as well. We were running monthly support groups for about 3 years. We haven't this year because I've run out of time to run them, but they were a pretty beautiful thing that we did. We run online webinars. So sometimes it's just, we might get an osteo or an acupuncturist or someone like that to come and talk to the group and run a webinar on it through their lens. And other times we pick webinars on topics. So I think one of the ones that we've got recorded on our website is on sex and relationships, because that is such an important topic. And also a lot of them weren't recorded or aren't recorded because I want people to feel like they can ask questions and not worry about everybody seeing what that personal question might have been. But the topic like sex and relationships, and we let everybody know we were recording it, is also important to have online, so that people that perhaps didn't feel like they wanted to be part of the conversation or weren't quite ready to kind of put their hand up and say, hey, this is actually an issue for me, could access it whenever they wanted. The other thing we do is a fair bit of advocacy. So we advocated pretty strongly to get Pep Talk into Victoria, just to connect the Pelvic Pain Foundation with some politicians in Victoria. We've spent a fair bit of time with Premier Dan Andrews and now with the Health Minister on their women's health announcements. We're working pretty hard to ensure that the government knows as much as we can kind of give them about endometriosis and the lived experience of endometriosis and women's health, because what we know is that if you have endo, you're quite likely to have an overlapping chronic pain condition. Lots of people then get migraines or fibromyalgia, for example. And so that kind of holistic model and ensuring that the government understand that actually all of those conditions are really under-recognised, under-researched, underfunded and undercared for, meaning if you turn up to a doctor with any of those conditions, you're quite likely to be told that they think you're okay.
Which you're not.
Yes.
You're so far from it.
That's why you're at the doctor.
Yeah. Isn't that what the doctor's for?
Yeah.
It's amazing to see what you're doing. And, information is key, and being able to get those webinars out, making people feel safe that they're not the only ones, but that they've got the information to be able to continue on, to advocate for themselves as well, and know that potentially the government's doing something to help this keep on going and to potentially one day find a cure. Hey, let's start with the diagnosis without laparoscopy. That would be great. We find that sort of it's 1 in 7 women that are estimated to have endometriosis. The stats have gone up. Do you think that's because more women are coming forward and advocating for themselves and pushing for that diagnosis? Or is there something else going around, or is it the research? What do you think's happening that's increasing this endometriosis?
You'd be surprised to hear that I'm going to say I think it's multifaceted. I think it's definitely awareness. You only need to talk to grandmothers and great-grandmothers to get a real understanding that a lot of them were suffering from pelvic pain and they didn't have a diagnosis. Their doctors weren't listening. We didn't have the science to understand endometriosis. Also, the word hysterectomy comes from the fact that we used to remove the uterus of hysterical women. But that dark history has been very hard to shed. And so that has been a part of a male-dominated industry. Medicine has been dominated by males who would then tell women that they were hysterical when they had pelvic pain. So we are shifting slowly, and I emphasise the slowly, away from that. And that is why we are learning that more people have it. There is also a theory that we now menstruate more than we used to. When we didn't have such great nutrition, we didn't used to menstruate this many times. And so the theory is that when you menstruate more, you're just more likely to have something go wrong. It is an inflammatory process, and it's now occurring more often in a person's lifetime by having less children. So that also means we menstruate more. And there is some preliminary research, and it is very preliminary, looking at plastics and phthalates and the role that it has as an endocrine disruptor, which means, lots of things, including cancer and other diseases, but endometriosis is one of the diseases that is kind of linked to endocrine disruptors. There's a lot more research to be done on all of these things, but I don't think it's going to be a one answer.
No, it will be, as you said, multifaceted. I have heard that we are menstruating more truth, from my gynecologist of, this is why going on some contraceptive pills actually okay, because you don't have to menstruate every single month, because you'd be pregnant a lot more back in the day.
Yes.
Yes. And so you wouldn't have this over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Do you find that there's some correlation in the amount of research? So, diabetes, everyone knows about diabetes. More males have diabetes than they do endometriosis. They're getting 5 times more funding than endometriosis. I think we know why. But do you think there were other reasons as to is endometriosis not seen as important as diabetes?
I think once again we thought the people that had pelvic pain that were female were hysterical, so we're not going to research it if we just think they're hysterical. We traditionally didn't do any research on women. In fact, most medical research has been done on men, and this is a condition that affected people that mainly identified as female. And I think there's been such a stigma around it that it's made it hard for individuals to advocate, and then also hard for researchers to then try and get funding. I think, unfortunately, because of the hysteria label, because of this idea that it's just a woman's lot, no one wanted to put the money into finding out what was actually happening or why this was a big problem.
It's so frustrating because endometriosis causes infertility. And isn't that quite a major problem?
It is one of the hugest factors, you know, in the support group. People would often talk about, we'd have young, like 18, 19-year-olds just saying, you know, how can I tell how this is impacting my fertility? And we do know that it affects some people's infertility. We know that it doesn't affect others, but it's a part of your identity and your choices as a person, whether you would like to have children or not. And so I get what you're saying, but once again, if you look at the fertility research, most of it wasn't done on women.
Right. Of course not. Whereas just the ones that carry the babies. But okay.
But I think the argument was for a long time that because we carried babies and because we were the ones that carried the next generation, we didn't want to do any experimenting or any research on women so that it didn't impact next generations. But what we actually did then was decide that women were just men without penises, I think. And so we did the research on men and then found that it was fine and then gave women medications and drugs that had massive impacts because our bodies work really differently, and we ended up playing a mass experiment on the human race.
Let's go on to better topics then and talk about support groups. How do you find the support groups? Is it really helping people to get through the sort of stages and prepare and be okay with dealing with their pain as much as you can be okay with dealing with pain?
Yeah, they're pretty amazing. When I first started the support group, I got all these books reading up on how to facilitate and how to be good at, running a support group. And I honestly didn't need to read any of it because these people were in such desperate need to talk to each other. And they were just so open with each other and so sharing and caring and supportive of one another. It's a pretty amazing thing to see, this kind of cohort of people that are so excited to be connected and to be able to share their lived experience with someone else that really understands it and really, pain down the front of the legs is a really common endo symptom, and it comes up in the support group so often because for some reason it's not often listed. And so it's not until they get to the support group that they go, oh, so you get that pain as well. But it's also everything, if you can't finish uni or you can't do your job in the way that you want, or your friends aren't being understanding because they're sick of you not being able to turn up to things. It is so nice to go to a group that understand, a group that get why you might have arrived with your heat pack, a group that get why you're in your baggy clothes because you're feeling really bloated.
Yeah.
Pretty beautiful thing.
Do you think it makes a difference? Do you think it lowers the pain?
Oh, that's a good question. I hope it lowers the pain. We know that stress and feeling misunderstood increases pain. Not saying that's all of the pain, but it can increase pain. So I hope that feeling supported lowers the pain. It's a great research topic.
It is great. We should look into that.
That's right.
I think there's a lot of mental load as well added to pain that you're now also, you could be a mum, so you're dealing with the mental load of raising your children. And we know that women take the majority of the mental load when it comes to that already. And then you've got your mental load of what pain am I going to be in today? What level am I going to be in today? What can I get done today? And where is my mental health going to be because of all of that and that frustration? Plus appointments, plus, trying to save up to make sure you can get to the pelvic floor physios, to the osteos, the wheat packs, there's a new strap-on wheat pack, or I can do this, I can do that. There's already so much more of that mental load. Do you think a support group just takes that away just a little bit?
I do. I think it reduces it. And I think that what comes with all of that is often guilt. The guilt that I can't be the mum that I want to be. The guilt that I had to lie down when my child was playing basketball. The guilt that I wasn't able to go to work. The guilt that I don't own a house. The guilt that there are people that have it worse than me, so maybe I should really be complaining. And I think what the support group does is lift that guilt burden. Because you're talking to other people that are saying, oh, me too. Or also often saying, me too, and you're doing a great job.
Yeah.
I see you.
Yeah, just that acknowledgement. Is there anything that you want to tell our audiences about endometriosis, what they can do to help themselves, help others, information you think that they really need to have?
Yeah, I would say that if you do have pelvic pain and you're thinking, whoa, I've got really heavy menstrual bleeding and I get pain, please do go and see your doctor. And if they don't, believe you, go to another doctor. Ask a friend to come with you. I know how hard it is to go from one doctor to another. Get some support people. The Pelvic Pain Foundation website has a great checklist of things to ask your doctor, so that it's not just about you telling your story, but you're double checking that that doctor knows what they're talking about and that they know about chronic pain and that they know what they're doing. And if they're not answering the questions in the right way, then go to another doctor. If you're a partner of someone with endo or pelvic pain, thank you, firstly, for all the support that you're offering them, but also ask them what they need. Maybe it's just a hot cup of tea. Maybe it's a back rub. Believe them when they're saying that their pain is really bad. My dream is that one day we'll have support groups for partners because they also have a massive load. Yeah. I can't imagine what it must feel like to see the person that you're in love with in that much pain, or sitting at the emergency watching a person writhing in pain and not being hurt. So a big shout out to all the partners there. And if you're a friend or a family member that's supporting a person with endo, once again, I don't want to give generic advice because it is really individualised, but check in with them and ask the questions on a good day. Like I saw on Wednesday that you really were in a flare. What do you need from me? Is it like a hot water bottle and a cup of tea, or do you want me to distract you with jokes, or what is it that you need when the pain's really bad? Because I'd really like to be there for you. And try and believe your friends. They're not turning up to your wedding or your party or your engagement party for fun. They want to be there.
Yeah, they really want to be there. You can forget, I think, when you're in chronic pain and you're so focused on what you can do and what's going on, and it's just end up in your own bubble, that you forget that there are people around you that can help.
Yes.
And it's so good to know that there's support groups there as well.
Yeah.
If you don't want to always be burdening the people around you too, and there's other places to go. How can people connect with Endo Help?
We've got on Instagram, we're on Facebook. The email address is on our website. It's my email address. It's katherine@endohelp.com.au. Happy to reply to any inquiries. Happy to also, if you're not in Victoria or you're somewhere else, or you just got a question, I can plug you into whatever I know or give you the contact details of anyone around that I think could be helpful. Please do feel free to reach out and chat to us.
Because you're all volunteers, aren't you? That's amazing. All volunteers taking the time to help, and you're always there for them.
Yes, and we all have endometriosis, so we also all know what it's like. And so I would also say, if it takes me a couple of days to reply, just know that is because I'm a volunteer. And we're quite busy doing the work that we do, and we also all have chronic health conditions.
Are there other resources and places that you'd recommend people going if they're just sort of trying to figure out this endometriosis pelvic pain journey?
Yeah, there's lots of different resources. There's EndoZone, which is online, and that's was created in South Australia. Endometriosis Australia has some great information. Pelvic Pain Foundation of Australia has some great information. And Jean Hales has some great videos. And then Endo Active actually ran, I can't remember if they called it a symposium or a conference several years ago, and the federal government have funded them, loading them up as videos. And they're meant to be incredibly informative. I actually haven't watched them, but I've spoken to many people that went to that conference, and they sort of came away saying, I just learned so much about myself and so much about my journey from that conference. So that's a great online resource that you can watch in your own time.
Thank you so much for your time. That was so informative, and I hope that we can keep spreading the word and using information as a way of strength for people.
Thanks so much for having me.
For more information and resources on endometriosis, check out the Endo Help Foundation website at endohelp.com.au. All the resources mentioned will also be in the show notes. If you'd like to hear from someone who has experience living with endometriosis, check out our episode with Laura, who speaks to us about her endometriosis journey. This podcast was recorded on Wadawurrung land.